Hello, my team is made by Pedro, Luis, Guillermo, and me, Diego. And in this presentation, we'll talk about the problem of fossil fuels and some sustainable alternatives like solar cells, galvanic cells, and fuel cells. We'll also share the lab experiments that we did related to these concepts. In fossil fuels and their problems. Fossil fuels are non-renewable energy sources formed from remains of ancient plants and animals. They are used worldwide to produce energy, but they also pollute the environment. As they run out, there will be no more supply of fossil fuels required to meet the demands, which could lead to global chaos. Solar cells. Solar cells are known as photovoltaic cells. They convert sunlight directly into energy using the photovoltaic effect. When sunlight hits a semiconductor like silicon, it knocks electrons loose, creating an electric current. Solar cells are clean and renewable alternative to fossil fuels because they don't produce greenhouse gases, require little maintenance, and can last for decades. However, they are obviously dependent on sunlight, and this can be bad if you live in an area where it's cloudy, and it can be expensive to install as well.
Galvanic cells are an alternative source of energy, which generates electricity due to the flow of electrons from the spontaneous redox reactions. So on galvanic cells, there is an anode and a cathode, and the anode transfer electrons through a bridge to the cathode, and due to that flow of electrons, there is electricity produced. So the galvanic cells are mainly used to power batteries or fuel cells. Also, compared to other energy sources, galvanic cells are not able to produce a big amount of energy. However, they play a big role on clean energy systems. Now with fuel cells, which is another alternative, are other alternative sources of energy. So fuel cells are based mainly on electrochemical reactions, since they use a fuel, which on this case we will be using hydrogen. So is introduced in the anode, and the molecules are on the anode. Molecules are separated into protons and electrons. So electrons undergo a process which that go to an external circuit, and due to that flow, they are able to produce energy. However, the protons go to the cathode, which they are mixed with oxygen, which is also introduced on the cathode, and they are able to produce byproducts like water or heat, since fuel cells are able to produce other byproducts based on the fuel. On this case, since we use hydrogen, the only byproducts possible are water or heat. So fuel cells are a very clean source of energy, and they are very effective since there is a very wide range of applications. However, uh, the, it does represent a bigger expense compared to other traditional methods.
All right, so now for laboratory work. So during this lab practice, we had the opportunity of performing the process of a well-working galvanic cell using solutions of zinc positive, 2 positive of 0.5 of molarity, and copper 2 positive of 0.5 of molarity as well, and strips of metallic zinc and copper. Of course, this 2 positive means that it had a positive charge. So the main objective of this activity was to make a battery-dependent toy to work with our galvanic cell as the energy source. And in the case of our team, we had to make a car controller that requires 6 volts of power, if I remember correctly, to turn on. So we had to not only use our galvanic cell, but actually the ones that our teammates made as well. So the building process of our galvanic cell, right? As we know, galvanic cells require a transfer of electrons from a substance to another, of course, from the cathode to the anode. And in the case of our experiment, zinc and copper were the selected substances. To make our galvanic cell work, the strip of zinc was placed in the zinc positive solution, and the copper strip was placed, of course, in the copper positive solution. And we connected these both solutions by placing a strip of paper soaked potassium chloride solution to work for us as a salt bridge, right, of the galvanic cell, meaning that each end of the paper strip was placed in a solution.
After finishing building the galvanic cell, what we did was we used a multimeter to measure the voltage and the current of our galvanic cell. In the previous slides, like this one, we show images where we are actively measuring the galvanic cell. For example, here, what we did was we combined several galvanic cells of other teams in series and measured the voltage. So for our results, what we found was that our galvanic cell had about 1.5 voltage. And when we combined it at the end, which will be explained later, the total voltage found in the circuit was 6 volts. Here is the video of the toy showing proof that it works. Here you can see how the light blinks in red, meaning that it's transmitting the signal. So as we can see in the video here for the discussion part, we know that it was actually transmitting signals to the other wireless car, which is the other part of the toy. And when we finished it, we compared our galvanic cell with the galvanic cell of other teammates. And what we found was that the voltages measured were very similar and that they were basically the same in how they were built. In our conclusion, our galvanic cell did work, and our toy needed 3 volts to function. So what we did was we combined several galvanic cells into one circuit, as you can see here, and this allowed us to make the car controller work. After working with the redox reactions, we noticed that they were actually very fun to play around with. We got to know and understand more about them. And now we have a better idea of how batteries are used, how they are created, and how they are present in our daily lives, or how the transfer of electrons is actually very present in our daily lives. Some recommendations is, for example, in our case, because the voltage was not enough, what we did was we combined the galvanic cells. So if you decide to do it, what you could do is to create more galvanic cells and combine them to increase the voltage. You should combine them in series because we know that voltage in series adds up. If you did do it in parallel, the voltage would not increase, it would stay the same. And it's also recommended to wrap the zinc strip in a thick piece of paper because they are basically positioned besides the copper electrode. So to prevent both electrodes from touching each other, we use this zinc, this layer of paper towel. And as always, you need to wear the appropriate clothing inside of the lab coat, the safety glasses and safety gloves, and take the necessary precautions when handling toxic chemicals. Here are our references. Thank you.